Have you ever felt quietly that the best of me is behind me? Maybe you hear from others, or maybe you say it to yourself when mornings feel smaller than they used to. Today I want to offer a different idea. What if the most surprising, most joyful seasons of your life are still ahead? Over the next several minutes, we'll slow down and sit with 5 people, ordinary folks, who made remarkable changes after age 70. I'll tell their stories in detail. Who they were before, what pushed them, the tiny decisions that changed everything, and the lessons you can borrow. These are not unrealistic fairy tales. They are practical, human, and quietly powerful. So breathe with me for a moment, and let's begin. Story 1. The woman who learned to paint at 72. Margaret spent most of her life caring for others. She baked for neighbors, sewed costumes for local theater, and kept the family photo albums organized. After her husband died, the house felt full of echoes. One afternoon, her daughter noticed an old box of postcards and a colored pencil set tucked away in a closet. Things Margaret hadn't touched since childhood. On a gentle nudge, she agreed to try a beginner painting class at the community center. At first, her fingers trembled and the brush felt foreign. She thought, what would I even paint? The instructor, a patient retired art teacher, encouraged her to bring one small object to class, something meaningful. Margaret brought an old teacup, and as she painted it in soft blues and broken whites, she started to remember the slow Sunday mornings with her husband, the warmth in his laugh. Tears came, then laughter, then a quiet, steadying joy. Over months, she discovered that each canvas held a small conversation with herself. She painted the light through the kitchen window, the back of a park bench, the roses she planted in spring. Her work never saw perfection. It sought presence. What changed for Margaret was not only a skill, but a new habit, showing up for herself for 1 hour, 3 times a week. Her social circle widened naturally. Other students shared recipes and stories, and the local library invited her to display 3 small pieces. At 75, she sold her first painting, not for money so much as proof she could create and be seen. Practical takeaway. If you've ever whispered that you'd like to try something just for fun, start with a tiny commitment. 1 hour, 1 class, 1 small object to paint or write about. The key is repetition and permission. Permission to be a beginner. Try a class, a book, or an app that teaches the basics, and give yourself 3 months to see what grows. Transition and short reflection. The first story shows how creativity reintroduces us to ourselves. It softens grief, gives structure to days, and opens gentle friendships. As we move on, notice how each story uses small, repeatable steps. 1 walk, 1 conversation, 1 seed planted, that add up to big changes. Story 2. The gentleman who fell in love again at 78. James had been a quiet presence in his town for decades. Helpful, polite, often alone. After losing his wife of 40 years, he kept his routines. Morning paper, chess with neighbor, the occasional church tea. He told himself companionship was a closed chapter. Then Helen arrived at the church social, warm, quick with a kind remark, and steady in the way she listened. They began sitting next to one another at community events and swapping stories about childhood summer by the river, about the tiny humiliations and surprising joys that fill a long life. Their first date was lunch in a park where the pigeons outnumbered the conversation. Helen laughed at James's dry jokes. James discovered he liked being seen and known again. There were awkward moments, introductions of family, deciding where to live, reconciling different habits. They both had barbed reactions from friends. Are you sure? And their own hesitations about blending finances and routines. They handled it the way many seniors do best. Slowly and honestly. They spent an afternoon listing the little things that mattered. One like morning quiet, the other music on the radio, and found ways to honor both. At 78, they married in a small service. Their anniversary photo shows 2 tired but radiant faces. A tenderness that looks like relief more than anything. James said, I thought my heart had retired. It was only sleeping. What made this possible was courage to connect and willingness to be vulnerable after loss. The skill wasn't in finding love, but in allowing the possibility of it again. Practical takeaway. If companionship matters to you, consider small, consistent steps toward connection. Accept an invitation. Say yes to a social event at your church or library, or try a low-pressure meetup like a book club or a knitting circle. Openness to new people often arrives disguised as a casual chat. Transition and short reflection. Love after 70 often looks different from romanticized youth. It's quieter, pragmatic, and deeply rooted in shared stories. That quietness can actually be more sustaining. Now let's shift from heart to body for our third story. Story 3. The veteran who became a marathon walker at 74. David served in the military in his younger years, then worked with his hands for decades. Retirement brought schedule and aches, arthritis, slow mornings, and a weight that seemed to add itself without asking. One morning a neighbor offered to walk the dog together. David agreed, not knowing that the 15-minute stroll would become the seed of a life change. The first week he could barely make it around the block without discomfort, but he celebrated small wins. 10 extra steps, less stiffness the next day, the thrill of breathing more deeply. Over time, these short walks became longer, then a precise habit, walking at the same time each morning. He tracked distances on a small notebook, then a simple app. A local walking group invited him to try a charity walk, and he found himself training with people who laughed at his jokes and cheered his progress. David set a goal that surprised everyone, a full marathon walking distance. He wasn't competing for time. He trained with a disciplined but gentle plan. Build distance gradually. Rest when necessary. Seek guidance from a physical therapist about safe stretches. On race day at 74, he crossed the finish line to a cheer that made him cry. Not because of the medal, but because he had practiced something small over and over until it became a new story about his body. David's transformation came from consistency, community, and a quiet accumulation of small wins. He didn't try to conquer his body. He respected it and coaxed it forward. Practical takeaway. If physical change feels daunting, pick a micro habit, a 5-minute stretch each morning, a 10-minute walk after lunch, or a weekly class in gentle yoga. Track progress in small increments and celebrate steps, not perfection. Joining others, neighbors, a local walking club, or a senior fitness class makes the habit stick. Transition and short reflection. Movement creates confidence and a feeling of agency. For many seniors, the body becomes a partner again, not an enemy. Our next story shows how purpose can be rebuilt outwardly by planting seeds, literally and socially.